Good day, everyone. This is a video recording on vector addition of two or more vectors. So we're going to find the vector sum or the resultant vector if we're given 3, 4, 5, or more vectors. Now, the previous videos, which you have probably watched already, is more on graphical and analytical way of adding vectors, and then it mainly consists of dalawang vectors lang. So dito, in our case, gagawin natin 3, 4, 5 vectors. So mamaya, may apat tayong example. So for this example, tatlo lang siya. So, I assume na napanood nyo na yung vector na dalawa, paano siya ina-add. So halos same pa rin yung process na gagawin nila. But in this case, we'll try to simplify everything para mas magets ninyo. Now, you have here three vectors, A, B, and C. You're going to find the resultant vector. So, first step that we do, we write a table. In my case, sa step ko, I write a table. You have there your angle with bearing, angle in standard position, the x component, and the y component. Now, let's first write the angle with bearing of each vectors, 35 meters per second, 55 degrees north of east. So you have 80 degrees south of east. And then, sorry, na-erase, south of east. And then you have 15 degrees west of south. Now, how do we get the angle in standard position? In our case, the best way to do is to draw para mas maintindihan nyo kung nasaan siya in terms of angle in standard position. Now, remember, angle in standard position is how far the angle is or what's the location in terms of the east or the standard position. Gaano siya kalayo from the east. So, sa atin, in terms of vector A, let's try to draw it. North of east, so from the east going to north, andito siya. So, in terms of standard position, the standard position is still 55 degrees. So, 55 degrees in standard position. Next, so erase lang natin to. Sabi naman dyan is 80 degrees south of east. So, kung drawing natin yung 80 degrees south of east from the from the south going to the east. So, south of east ay nandito sa lugar na ito. Okay, so it's in this quadrant. So, in terms of standard position, you have 360 minus 80. You'll be having 280. Sandali. Gamitin natin yung color blue para consistent tayo. 280 degrees. So, I hope that finding the angle in standard position is actually very easy na sa part ninyo kasi na-discuss na to last time. And then, for the last one, west of south, from south going to west, andito siya. So, ito. So, in terms of standard position, from the east again, so hindi siya lumagpas ng 270. So, let's just subtract this value, which we know as 15. So, 270 minus 15 is 255 in standard position. Ayan. In standard position. So, once you find the standard position, actually easy na siya. So, very, very important ang paghanap ng standard position because if you actually don't find the angle in standard position, you'll have a hard time finding the right components in terms of x and the y component. Now, let's proceed in finding or solving for the x and y components. Okay, let's use this green pen for the x component. Same, you have 35 cosine 55 using our standard position, 35 sine 55 in terms of our y, 15 cosine 280, 15 sine 280. What else? You have 20 cosine 255 and then 20 sine 255. Okay? So, medyo pangit lang ang surat ko pero just bear with the handwriting that I have. Alright, now, solving for the x and the y components that we have right here, let's use a different color for the x component. Gawin natin violet or purple. So, sunod na lang po kayo. So, if you have your calculators with you, can just pause this and try to solve the x and the y components using dalawang decimal place lang. So, obviously, you can also include here sa may part pa lang ng standard position to know kung anong x and y component mo. This is in the first quadrant. This is in the third quadrant. This is also in, this is in the fourth quadrant. I'm so sorry. fourth quadrant. Ayusin natin yung drawing. Is in the fourth quadrant kasi 280. And then, this is in the third quadrant. So that, alam mo na the x component dito ay positive, positive, x and y. Dito ay positive, negative. Dito naman sa kabila ay parehas negative. And then we can double check kung tama talaga yung components natin. Kasi if hindi, ibig sabihin may mali ka sa pag standard position mo. Alright, sige, let's continue. For the x, 35 cosine 55, so 2 decimal places tayo. 20.08. 15 cosine 280 is 2.60. You have negative 5.18. So that's for the x component. Let's proceed with the y component. You have 35 sine 55 is 28.67. You have negative 14.77. So, again, nag-agree na naman siya. And then, negative 19.32. So, if you try to remember graphical and solving analytically in terms of two vectors, what we try to do is get the sum of the x and the y component because actually, yan yung lumalabas na components ng resultant vector natin. So, let's solve for the summation of x and summation of y. Summation of x and then summation of y. Now, this is very, very important because the summation of x and summation of y shows kung nasaan talaga yung resultant vector natin. So, pag inad natin yung summation of x, ang lalabas is 17.5. Just pause this one kung gusto mong mag-compute muna tapos para ma-check kung tama yung sinasabi ko. And then, summation of y is negative 5.42. So, what do you observe in terms of the x and y component? You have a positive value in terms of x and a negative value in terms of y. So, what quadrant is this lying on? It's in the fourth quadrant or Q4. So, in terms of directions, you know that Q4 in terms of bearing is actually south of east. Now, if you don't know this part po, I don't know kung na-mention ito sa previous videos, but pag gumagamit tayo ng tan inverse, meron lang naman pong 4 na direction na pupuntahan yung angles mo. Kung nasa Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. Pag nasa Q1, north of east, Q2, north of west, south of west naman sa Q3, and then south of east sa Q4. So, you try to observe as well, opposite ka vertical angle theorem tayo. Q4 is just the opposite of Q2, while Q1 is the opposite of Q3. So, kaya tayo dyan nagkakaroon ng vertical angle. So, parehas lang naman siya. So, hopefully, you know all of these things sa part na to. So, going back, so let's check. We know that this value should be correct kasi ito na dapat yung pupuntahan ng direction or ng angle natin. So, before we proceed with that one, let's first solve for the resultant vector. So, solving for the resultant vector, magnitude of the resultant vector is equal to the square root of summation of x squared plus summation of y squared. So, summation of, you have 17.5 squared plus, yes, ang ganda ng sulat natin, plus negative 5.42 squared. You'll be getting a value of, 2 decimal places po ulit tayo, of 18.32. And then the unit is meter per second. So, there you have it. You have the angle of, you have the magnitude of the resultant vector, which is 18.32 meters per second. So, continue na tayo sa may baba. Kasi this is the first time I'm using this one. Alright, sige, let's continue. So, let's get now the angle. So, solving for the angle, you know that this is just the tan inverse of, same lang nung ginagamit natin before, pero dito na, summation of y over the summation of x. So, tan inverse of summation of y is negative 5.42 and then 17.5. So, the angle that you'll be having is negative 17.21 degrees. Now, before we proceed with naming the direction, kasi di ko nga masyadong aram pa kung anong maluwas negative 17.21, so ang gibuhon ko, para mas clear sa part ko, I have to draw it. So, 17.21 degrees is a clockwise direction because it's negative, so papunta siya dito. So, this is negative 17.21. But in terms of direction, you know that this is east, north, west, and south. So, kung papunta from the east siya going to the south, so this is actually just 17.21 degrees south of east. And if you try to observe, yung south of east natin agrees with the component that we have, which is it's in the fourth quadrant. So, wala na tayong problema in terms of vertical angles kasi okay na yung angle na nakuha natin. So, the angle with bearing, so let me just rewrite this, angle with bearing is 17.21 degrees south of east. Now, we can already solve for the uh, angle in standard position. Now, angle in standard position is from the east going to this direction right here. So, day siya naglagpas ng 360. So, we can just subtract 360 minus 17.21. So, angle in standard position. So, what we did is 360 minus 17.21. So, angle in standard position, you'll be having a value of 342.79 degrees in standard position. So, you have the following answers. Itong mga i-box natin. So, pag sinulat natin yung final answer natin, using a red pen, so the resultant vector is equal to 18.32 meters per second, 17.21 degrees south of east, and then, or 342.79 degrees in standard position. So, if you try to observe how many steps did we have, so first step natin, gumawa tayo ng table. That's step 1. Second step, we look for the standard position. Third is solve for the x and the y component. So, sige, third and fourth. Fifth is get the x and y component. So, 5 and 6. Next, sige, lagay na natin to para hindi kayo mahirapan. That's the 7th step. 8th step is solve for the magnitude. 9th is solve for the angle. 9, solve for the angle. 10 is check kung yung angle with bearing natin agrees. If it agrees, okay. Pag hindi, mag-standard position, mag-vertical angle tayo. And then 11 is this one. 12 ito. So, medyo mahaba. Sabihin natin may 12 steps talaga siya. Pero kung i-simplify natin, madali lang naman talaga siya. So, you have approximately 12 steps na ginawa. So, kung i-graphical natin to, sir, kung i-graphical ko po ba siya, lalabas pa rin ba siyang tama? So, tingnan natin. Sige, paano ba to paliitin? Try natin. Paliitin ba siya? Ayan. Let's try to solve here sa taas. Okay. So, if we try to use graphical method or parang isi-sketch lang natin siya, rough draft lang po. Check na lang kung south of east pa talaga ang dudumanan kang resultant vector ta. So, if you know, let's use this one. Blue for vector A. Vector A is north of east or basically, sabi sa kanya, 55 in standard position. So, ito yung 55 natin. Next, dali lang. Yan. That's your 55 degrees in standard position. So, next, gagawa tayong again ng arbitrary na Cartesian coordinate plane para mahiling ta kung saan siya sunod na pupunta. Next is south of east or 280 degrees in standard position. So, let's use this one. So, papunta siya dito. Yan. And then, lagay ulit tayo ng arbitrary Cartesian coordinate plane. And then, the last vector is west of south or 255 in gamitin natin 255, so andito siya kung arbitrary. Ayan. So ito rough sketch lang yung ginagawa ko ha. And then your resultant vector is from the initial point to your final point. So itong parang violet yung resultant vector natin. So if we try to observe, the resultant vector is actually in the fourth quadrant. So it's correct na nasa south of east talaga siya. Right? And then, yung components ng fourth quadrant ay positive x and then negative y. At the same time, so yung ginagawa talaga natin, kung i-try natin i-illustrate, kinukuha natin yung y component and then x component. Kasi kinuha natin yung mga x and y dito sa mga vectors natin kanina. So, I hope that's clear. This is how you add vectors. Pero itong example na to ay tatlo. So, ginawa ko lang para mas specific, meron kang 12 steps. Pero kung gusto mo siyang i-simplify into 5 steps or 6 steps, better. So actually, pare-pares mo lang yung gagawin mo. Alright? Sige.